Good evening, everyone. Happy Monday to all who celebrate Monday. If you've ever heard me talk about the mission of this channel and specifically these live streams, it's a little bit more low key. It's a little bit more relaxed and less formal. And sometimes I just experiment a little bit. And so that is the way I want you to understand tonight's opening rant is me trying to draw together some things that I'm noticing. And so tonight I'm going to try and draw together the new Superman movie, um, college educated women, and raw milk all together into the same rant. So let's see if we can figure this out. So last night I went to go watch the new Superman movie with a few other priests. Um, I just kind of wanted to be in an air conditioned room, and they've got a really fancy movie theater here where you can order beer from your seat, and that's pretty. Even if the movie's bad, you could usually get a good beer out of that. So we're watching the new James Gunn Superman movie. There's a lot riding on this, because superhero movies have not been doing well the past few years, and this is a hotly anticipated title. There's one plot point that I want to spoil. And so that's why I've got the spoiler flags all over this. So you've been warned multiple times if you don't want the movie spoiled. And now is your time to depart and go find something else to listen to on YouTube. Superman's got his fortress of solitude in the Arctic, and he has a message from his parents, and he finds that message from his parents quite comforting. And so we get to hear that message from his parents, but he can only hear the first half of it about how they're sending him from Krypton to Earth to save him, and because they think that that is the place where he can do the most good. And then the message glitches out after. So here come the spoilers. That's like the first 5 minutes of the movie. Lex Luthor manages to break into his fortress of solitude, and with the help of his crazy nanobot engineer lady henchwoman, is able to decrypt the second half of the message. The second half of the message would be, I think, considered a major departure from the comic book canon. Second half of the message says, "Okay, call Jalil or call, I can't remember. Okay, Superman, you're being sent to Earth specifically to be in charge. We expect you to rule over these people, to get a large number of children, have as big a harem as you want. That's your duty there." And Superman had never heard that part of the message until Lex Luthor broadcasted it all over every TV in the world immediately because it's a comic book movie and just don't think about it. And he's kind of shocked and hurt by that because he hadn't interpreted the first half of that parent's message in that way. Now, a lot of people are going to look at this change from the superhero mythos and the Superman mythos of instead of being sent to Earth by his parents to be like an upstanding moral exemplar according to our standards. They've changed the motivation that Superman's parents from Krypton sent him there too. And so this is one of the themes that's running through the movie is that Superman, thought he knew where he came from. He thought he knew about his parents back on Krypton. Finds out that they have feet of clay. Finds out that they are not the people he was expecting them to be. And so a lot of people would look at this and say that this is a radical change. But when I'm looking at it and thinking about some of the other superhero movies that I have seen, this is actually a very conservative move for the Hollywood mind in the superhero genre, right? This is a very common message, I think, even with movies that James Gunn has been in. So let's rewind our brains back about a decade, how many people here would remember Guardians of the Galaxy 2, right? Oh, there's Peter Quill, and he doesn't know who his father is, and he gets an opportunity to reconnect with his father. Um, and turns out his father's actually kind of evil, right? Okay, so there's a plot, and it's like, okay, well, boy, these two movies are kind of similar, in that people learn something about their father, usually specifically their father, and they find out that they need to rebel against their father because he has evil intentions, and we need to uh, set a different course and be a different sort of man. And then if you guys remember, I watched all of these movies, right? I was on the Marvel bandwagon, just like a lot of other young men of my generation. Do you remember Black Panther? Do you remember the revelation about something about, Black Panther's dad uh, not being the man that he had portrayed himself to be? He had a dark secret in his past, and can't remember the real name of the character, so it's just going to have to stay at Black Panther. Had to reconcile himself with the fact that his father was not the man whom he thought he was. This seems to be a renewing trope in the Hollywood superhero space. This comes up over and over again. Oh boy, do you remember the revelations in Thor Ragnarok? Right, Thor, the third Thor movie, when as it turns out, Odin didn't peacefully make an alliance with all these 12 realms or whatever, but he conquered them with force with the older sister that Thor never knew he had. Oh boy, this theme comes up over and over again in these superhero movies. It comes up over and over again. Your father is not the man that you thought he was. And then the message is always this: you have to go and become your own man. You have to go and become your own person. That's the message over and over again. Now, here's the deal. That story has a place, right? There is a place for that story, that sort of story where, the tyrannical father isn't who he thought he would be. You need to come up with a new identity. Sometimes it makes sense. Sometimes, let's say that there are people whose fathers are actually not a good role model. They ought to people their sons ought to walk a different path with them. So it's like that's a possible story, but for some reason, the superhero part of Hollywood is very stuck on this story, and they cling to it with the tenacity of a conservative who doesn't know what else to do. Like this is the only story they have access to. So I'm saying that this is actually a fundamentally conservative move, and frankly, it's a fundamentally conservative move. So let's take a look at this word conservative, and let's just look at it what it actually means. If you're conservative, you're trying to conserve an order that exists, something that is actually in place, something that is actually present for people. You're trying to conserve the current order of things. And as far as I can tell, a lot of the current order of things in the world about which the world that we're living does come from the spirit of 1968. And what was the spirit of 1968? Ultimately, it was a bit of rebellion against the fathers. Were there certain things that maybe could have been updated and improved? Yes. Go see my video about the things that I really appreciate about Vatican II and am very happy about. So that's a thing to think about, to look at, in case you're wondering. But if that's your only story, that's going to be pretty lopsided, and that's going to be pretty. Um, yeah, it's just not enough. It's not enough. It's not a big enough world to live in, narratively speaking. And that led me on to further thoughts, further disastrous thoughts. And so when we're looking at the current order of things, the majority of people's values and basic assumptions, it's some form of progressivism, some form of feminism. That's what people generally default to. Probably the majority of people who live in cities just naturally get drawn into that way of thinking, which means to me that the most conservative people in the United States of America today are progressive college educated women. That they are doing the most to uphold the current order of things. And this is explaining to me something that I've been puzzling about for the past 2 years. So, I frequently get to minister to the community that revolves around the traditional Latin Mass in Fargo, North Dakota. Um, that's a little bit more of an experimental sort of thing. Most of the people there did not grow up in a priestly fraternity of St. Peter Parish or an SSPX parish. They discovered this as an adult. They found it and they really appreciate it and they really enjoy it. And so we should expect to find the personality types there to be a little less instinctively conservative, to be a little bit more adventurous and a little bit more experimental. And I think that explains why all of these families who attend the traditional Latin Mass um, are really into the Make America Healthy Again movement. They respect Robert Kennedy Jr. and they want to experiment with changes in their food supply, including the raw milk. They're very, they will drive a fairly long way to find a farmer who sells it, and they'll buy it for $8 a gallon when they could get it for $2.50 much more closer and much more conveniently in Fargo itself. Because the sort of women and families who are drawn to the traditional Latin Mass, that's a more pioneering and adventurous spirit. It's not a conservative, let's keep things safe kind of spirit there. So I think that's something that I've noticed. I welcome everybody's feedback on that. If you want to hop on and tell me that I'm wrong and explain to me why I'm wrong about that, um, maybe we could take a look at that. Let's see what people yeah, yeah, and if you look at, like, the 1978 Superman, they have a very noble character, played by Marlon Brando for Superman's father. We get a fairly, decent amount of time with that. Um, apparently it's a cookbook. Yeah, apparently it's a cookbook. Yeah, and that's a little bit downplayed. It's a little bit downplayed in the new one. I don't know. It's okay. It's an okay movie. I'm getting tired of the James Gunn. Let's end every serious scene with something funny. Getting tired of that. Um, yeah. So rebels gonna rebel. That's Mark's explanation. Or it's all about their incompetence. Stupid people look the same. It's entirely possible. So let's bring Mark on. And for the first time showing his face on my stream, we've got Geo here. So yeah. Mark, am I on the path or am I going off the reservation here?
It's your definition of conservative is interesting. It's gonna take me a while to to puzzle that out, right? Because if you set it in a hierarchy, the conservation happens, but it's not due to a desire to conserve. It's more stupid people all look the same, and mimicry, because I think what's probably happened is because of, we'll say, the success. This is a crazy word, of the 60s, or people in the 60s, that the pattern you're talking about got emulated. And
Mhm.
so, right, because that's the rise of things like punk, and right, like I'm smack dab in the middle of that, watching watching it going like, I don't understand this. These people. So like I lived in this house, right, with the dirty, smelly, druggy hippies. And the name of the house, by the way, because this has already come up on Twitter now, was called Fandom House. So,
They had that word back in the 90s?
oh, you're not understanding. I am positive they invented it for
Holy
real.
mackerel. Holy
Right.
mackerel.
Yeah. So, yes, they had that word in the early 90s. So, we're talking probably 1990, early 90s. It was called Fandom House. All the houses had names. Ours was called Fandom House. What they all had used cars, like I did, right? My used cars were free because that was the only price I could pay. And you make do with what you got. And I at one point I had 12 cars. So it's like, it's fine. Now, none of them worked, but that's a different problem. So,
Swapping parts out. I'll get the spark plugs for
no,
this one.
no, but I'd get different ones working at different times using different cheap means, right? So, um, their cars were all 10 years old, but they were all BMWs, Volvos, Saabs, right? And then where did their cars? So my cars came from begging and pleading with people I met on bulletin board systems. Where did their cars come from, Father?
Their
Where do you think
parents. Their
their
parents
cars
gave them their
came
old
from? Their
car.
parents.
Yeah, yeah.
That was previously the brand new car they had been, getting picked up from school with, 5 years earlier, right?
Mhm.
And so their rebellion against their parents was to become dirty, smelly, druggy hippies. Like that's what they were doing. And so what one girl who severely autistic, as it turned out, I didn't click for me at the time. Um, one time she was complaining about having to do her taxes because her father put 3 of their Washington D.C. buildings in her name. So she's getting income from these buildings, and she's
Oh,
complaining about not having a job and being depressed. And I'm like, you have all the money in the world. What do you like from
turns out
my
that
pay?
doesn't
I'm
make
making
you
$7 an hour.
yeah.
I'm like,
But that's
I'm
seven
making
bucks an hour in early 90s money.
no. Well, no, and yeah, if you had roommates like I did, because I lived in Somerville, the most densely populated city in the world, for real, like more densely populated than Mexico City, although they
More
jockeyed for
densely
number one.
populated than that island in the Maldives.
Yes,
Hmm.
yeah,
That one's crazy, dude. They got like 300,000 people on a tiny island. Takes 20 minutes to
true,
walk across it.
true, but that it was just a very different ethos, but they're they're following and at the same time establishing because they have these big networks, a whole thing. So a whole bunch of things come out of that. The Boston Dungeon Society, which is not great. Science fiction conventions, a couple of those, which they sort of pioneered, um, and the whole free software movement. These are all the same people, right? There's a lot of overlap, and they from Boston basically they moved the world. They moved a lot of the world, but they were following 60s culture in the 90s, in the late 80s, early 90s. That's what they were doing. Yeah, what one of my friends had, he grew up in Burlington, Vermont, and when he was in, I think he said he was in high school or maybe it was like first year of college, he invested $1,000 in Ben and Jerry's. Because Ben
Oh,
and
so
Jerry were
he's
just running around town asking people for investment, right? And that was worth tens of thousands of dollars when he cashed it in,
mhm, mhm,
right? But like, I those are social circles. It's not
mhm.
if you were in Burlington, Vermont, you would have run into Ben and Jerry and they would have offered you stock. That's not true. That's the
Right.
way they tell the story because from their perspective, that's what happened to them.
because
That
everybody they
wouldn't have
know
happened
in
to you or I.
Burlington, Vermont is a part of this social circle, right? Because when I think of Fargo, I don't think of literally everybody there. I
Right.
think of my friends and family, right? So
It
it's a natural enough mistake to make.
Right. Well, people don't realize hierarchy and social circles and things like that. And so it's not physical area, right? Materialism doesn't work. You can be as close physically as you want, but if you don't have an introduction, if you don't have a way in, if they're not known to you, then the opportunities that they have won't be offered.
Yeah, yeah. Now here's what I'm thinking about, Mark, and maybe we can discuss this a little bit. So we've got this revolution in the late 1960s. Picks up
Hmm.
a whole lot of momentum, right? And like
Right.
and you're pointing out that people are starting to internalize this and mimic it, which is, the
Yep.
natural sort of thing, because you see somebody do something and you think that you can do it. That it's going to work out exactly the same for
Or
you, you
or
know.
you have to, which is more what I'm pointing at. It's like
Sure.
you're mimicking most of the things in your life because
So
you
and
can't think through those things.
yeah,
It's not
yeah, yeah.
possible for you to do that.
So at
So,
what point does all of this momentum and all of this behavior turn into the set order of things?
well, if it's ordered and orderable, um, it just happens. Otherwise, it just destabilizes like an unbalanced wheel.
Well, chaos leads to order, which leads to entropy, which leads to chaos. It's like a triad of cycles, basically.
Yeah.
You're
Yeah, I just think you're pretty quiet there, Gio, so we're having a hard time hearing you.
Yeah, you're super
Um,
quiet. Get closer to the mic.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
So so here's kind of what I'm looking at, right? And this is like some made up evolutionary psychology stuff that everybody does it, right? Because
You might
that's
as
the
well.
way.
Everyone else
Yeah,
is
you
doing it.
might as
Yeah.
well. Everybody does it, right? You are responsible for a small child. You're in some kind of tribal or family unit, right? And your instinct is going to be that you want things to be safe, stable, and predictable, right? So the order of things that's working, is like that's going to be a nice baseline. And if you think you can get something better, maybe you can try and improve things, right? So it's not like there's any room for improvement, but you probably have some image of what safety and stability looks like, and it behooves you to like kind of cling to that, and maybe be a little bit resistant to change. But you're not buying this story,
No.
huh?
No, that's too rational. Look, like everything that happens to us imprints on our memory. And then when we see a system, we either adopt it, modify it, or reject it, right? And so, there's that whole set of commercials around, we'll help you, we can't prevent you from becoming your parents, right? So why do you think people become their parents, especially when they're rebel when they're younger? Because
That's the
when you're
condition.
30 years old, you're patterning the 30-year-olds around you, and those are your parents. That's it's
Plus, we don't
actually
have.
that simple, right?
Yeah.
So it's not a rationalization thing. And then so it's not like, oh, I see something stable, I'm gonna no, it's like you have passions, you have desires, you have these drives, and then you're sort of looking for how to get there. And what you're doing is pattern matching, all unconsciously. None of it's rational. And that's how you get behavior. And that's why
Yeah.
behavior is not rational because it's not done through rational means. Now, anything can be rationalized or explained. And that's actually why, to your point, everybody's sitting there putting things into a evolutionary psychology framework because you can do that with any. I could put anything into that framework. Right now,
Yeah.
I have special skills. Don't try this at home. But I can put anything into any framework. That's not even hard for me. Other people struggle with this for some reason. And I'm like, no, I can just give me the frame, give me a few minutes, and tell me what you want put in it. And I'll put it in there. and it'll sound fine because you can. I heard a guy, RJ sent me something recently on the Discord where he's like, well, a bunch of people are following this guy and he's giving this geo update, and he's got like a PhD in economics, and he started to talk about game theory and the ultimate theory of, the ultimate system of game theory or something. And I'm like, what? And then he's tying physics into game theory. And I'm like, all right, this guy's never read any game theory at all, because game theory has nothing to do with physics. What? So in fact, it's distinct and discrete for a reason. Like, it doesn't, and he's making this up. So I'm like, this has got to be somewhere on the internet. I'm actually going to search the internet for this term and see where he got it. No, he made it up. It's actually not anywhere else. I was like, this is great. So he's got a huge following. Hundreds of thousands of people are watching this video. And I'm like, everything he's saying is complete nonsense. It's totally false. It doesn't even make any sense. Everything. And that's because he's mimicking a pattern. Now he thinks he sounds very convicted of his statements, but he thinks he's making sense. But actually what he's saying is wrong. It's just that almost nobody's going to know that because nobody read John Nash and game theory. Nobody knows what that field's
Right.
about.
They just watched A Beautiful Mind and they saw like the 30-second presentation of it, which I think is actually incorrect. And then, that was it.
One thing I do have to add to this is a phrase I heard a long time ago that stuck with me throughout life, and I think it is very relevant here, is the truth is stranger than fiction, because fiction has to make sense.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Like, I never actually saw any of these sketches, but apparently back in the 90s, there was a recurring character, Cardinal Guido Sarducci on Saturday Night Live.
Yeah.
And then, like, honestly, Cardinal Betchu, or formerly, what? No, he lost his voting privileges, but got to stay in the College of Cardinals, which is a disciplinary decision that will always baffle me. He was just like, you couldn't make up the stuff this guy was saying. He sued a newspaper for publishing reports about him that, like, were basically true, but they made him look bad. And he said, you ruined my chances at being elected Pope. So I'm going to sue you for like 50 million euro or something crazy like that. It was just like, how do you find these people, And yeah, just go walk down the street and you'll find somebody who's nobody could possibly anticipate in a work of fiction.
Yeah, well, I don't think there's any such thing as fiction, the way we use the term. I think there's bad stories and there's good stories, and that's pretty much about it, right? And there's more technical or clinical or precise and accurate scientific sorts of works. And then there's works that are retellings of actual events, and there's works that are retellings of patterns. And then if you just put them in those categories, like you can categorize everything quite nicely, and it doesn't really matter, right? And some, entertainment, is definitely the goal there. And that's sort of, where we all go wrong. Like right now, everyone's talking about story, and they don't have a good definition of story. And so they're lumping all kinds of things in with story that definitely aren't story. So like I could argue that a technical manual is the story of how a piece of technical equipment or a technical process works, right? And under their definition of story, that would work. I think that's a stupid way to talk.
According to Isaac Asimov, you can form an entire religion around that.
Well, right. They're lumping in mythos and misunderstanding the difference between, let's say, a technical, accurate, precise description, a story that inhabits a pattern, a story that's retelling of events, and a mythos. So there's like 4 things there at least that are different.
And we don't know the exact events and details of that. We know the general gist of it, but it's been so old and told so many times that we don't know, specific critical information that, outside of what we know.
Yeah,
right.
Normally,
and it's not necessarily critical information, because if it really was critical to the story, it
It,
it would have been remembered.
what's critical in the story is the context.
Yes.
And wisdom is knowing what context you're in and what stories apply. That's
The
it.
wise man orders all things.
Right. Right. And that ordering is between content and context.
The fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom, right? So, you need to know that if you don't apply this properly, you might get in trouble.
A good example is recently I just spent 10 years basically living what I would call the reconciliation of Cain and Abel with my roommates. And there's a lot of parallels between us in the story, me being Cain in that regard. But it all worked out in the end. We're on really good terms now, and he's taking care of the house while I'm in Denver. It was a very strong exercise of patience, and there was a lot of diabolic oppression throughout both of our lives for a very extreme period of time. But love can break through a mountain of demons. I can say that with complete confidence.
Yeah, yeah. Love or caring, just setting the goal and just
Caring.
going after that really hard.
When I was getting ready to leave the airport, that entire day was like a spiritual warfare D-Day for me. I was getting attacked on every front in every possible way, and I just kept pushing through. Once I got to the airport, everything smoothed out ever since.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And literally, love got me through that. That's why I say that love can literally go through a mountain of demons. And I came here under the impression that my brother was probably not going to let me stay here and probably punch me in the face, that sort of thing. But I called him, had a heartfelt conversation, and we met up, and it's been very good ever since. We actually went out yesterday and caught a bunch of blue rock crawdads parked down the road and had them for dinner.
All right.
Sent me a bunch of money today, so I got a bunch of food for everybody tonight. Got a bunch of burgers, and organic beef, and that sort of thing. And awesomely enough, my brother's name is Vincent. And about 2 blocks down the road is St. Vincent de Paul's Church, which I've gone to the last 2 days in a row. And about 2 or 3 blocks past there is the gigantic, mind-blowing, enormous Archdiocese of Denver. I'm literally walking 5 minutes walking distance, so I'm hoping to see what sort of resources are available there.
So you're within proximity of the mighty one, Archbishop Aquila, former bishop of the Diocese of Fargo, the one who accepted me into seminary.
Really?
Oh.
Also, this. I don't know if you're familiar with Father Stephen Imbarato, the protest priest. He's been arrested for protesting outside of abortion clinics in the past. I have a better connection with him. He helped me figure out how to get set up with a spiritual director, who's Lindy Morelli in Scranton, Pennsylvania. She runs the Lighthouse Ministry. She's a blind from birth, Carmelite hermit laity for 30 years running ministry, and entirely on divine providence. On top of that. And Father Imbarato is one who got me to seek out a spiritual director, and the Lord guided me to her. And I ended up, he's from the Diocese of Santa Fe. I'm at St. Vincent de Paul's in Denver, and the pastor there is going on retreat, and his place is Monsignor Doug, the last name. He's from Santa Fe, and Father Imbarato was under him for his first year of his priesthood and his assistant. Can't make these things up. Everything just keeps locking, falling right into place.
Yeah. You can't make it up. That's true.
Like it's right here. It's a piece of cloth that was touched to the tomb of Christ on a Jerusalem or Bethlehem olive wood cross. I got a nice little pile of crosses with me. I like to carry a lot of them.
Yeah.
My favorite one, though, I've never seen one like this until recently. Jesus flying on the cross.
Yeah. You're not allowed to hang those up in church, but you can keep one on your person. So
I like it. I got both. It's like the sorrowful mysteries, and then that one could be representative of what is it, glorious mysteries?
Glorious mysteries. Yeah, the resurrection. Yeah. But it doesn't qualify as a proper crucifix because Jesus actually needs to be crucified. So,
Right. It's
as long
more
as
of
we
a
just
example,
Yeah.
symbolism.
Yeah.
So I like to have both. You just can't have one without the other, really.
Yeah.
See, that one's representative, Lord, I commend my spirit into your hands.
Something like that. Yeah.
That's a second-class relic of St. Anthony prayer book right here.
Oh my. It's been blessed and touched. Okay. I think that's technically a third class relic.
I don't know, it
Um,
says second class.
does it?
Or it might be third class.
Yeah.
I don't
So
know.
usually
What's the
a
second
third
class?
class relic. So first class relic is part of their body, right?
Yeah.
The second class relic is something that they would have had on them rather often. Crucifix, breviary, maybe a little bit of their habit, something like that. A third class relic is touched to one of those things.
Okay,
So
okay. Third class then, I guess.
yeah.
On top of that,
So
I got
anyway, we've got
bunch of
rules and
stuff.
hierarchy for all these things.
Good.
That's
Nope.
what's important. Don't break it down by rebelling.
And a little
That's right.
catechism.
Yep.
All right.
Got a bunch of prayer cards to pass out to the homeless when I get down there. A bunch of St. medals. I got a pile of I like a little St. Michael verse for them. A bunch of blessed and exercised St. Benedict medals and many others.
Man, you're untouchable right now.
You kind of, yeah. I just got the anointing of the sick from Monsignor S. a few weeks ago, so I'm kind of running with it. Yeah, he was also the man who baptized me. It's this weird big chain of events that are like coming full circle in reflective ways in my life that I don't really quite know how to put the words, but I have a feeling you know what I'm talking about.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Oh, on top of that, hang on, where is it? One other thing. Have you ever heard of the author Robert Abel? Read about it.
I have not. I'm sure I'm about to hear all about him.
Yep. He wrote this book, Catholic Warrior. By Michael, it's a spiritual warfare manual, essentially. And I got this book like 2 days before I left. No idea about the author. I read it within a day. I get to the back about the author as I'm on the airplane from Denver. So I'm going to meet with him on Wednesday and
Oh,
see
wow.
what we can discuss from there.
Man,
It's been nonstop, dude.
yeah, yeah. I'm not sure I can handle all that. I'm glad you're the one who's going through it and not me.
I love it. I'm built for this. I even got my Padre Pio dog tag from my spiritual warfare residence, and of course, representing St. Anne's National Shrine Basilica in Scranton, Pennsylvania dog tag.
Man, who would have thought that all that was going on in Scranton, Pennsylvania? You know,
All places, right?
yeah, all places. I don't know, Pennsylvania. So one of my professors right now in canon law school is from the Diocese of Erie, Pennsylvania, and apparently Erie is the land of the weird.
Mm.
I hear that.
And that also applies to the Catholic Church. And so we're in
Yep.
temporal goods right now. It's about the administration of church property. Not the most thrilling thing to be studying, but a very necessary thing for, good ordering and good stewardship and that sort of thing. And for every canon that we're going over, Father Beale has a story from the 1970s or 80s or the 60s or the 50s, 90% of which happened in Erie, Pennsylvania, of something going horribly wrong and people not following canon law and things ending poorly. So I don't remember where I was going with that, but it's I think the latest one was a priest who in September would go down to Tucson and open up his cabin, his house there,
Right.
would come back for Christmas and then to his parish, which he was the pastor of, and then
Right.
go back to Tucson, come back for Holy Week and Easter, and then go back to Tucson till May until he was done with Tucson, and then he would go open up his cottage on Lake Erie, um, which is like, that's actually really bad to like never be at your parish and live on a permanent vacation. But apparently the bishop didn't mind. But he was he was throwing away the city of Erie tax on the parking lot and the rectory.
I gotta wonder if like some sort
And
of Native
and the
American
only reason they were able to catch it before the state
style.
seized the property for unpaid taxes and auctioned it off was
Right.
because the diocesan chief financial officer looked through all of the legal notices and saw such and such parish listed for like non-payment of taxes. So
Oh,
anyway,
wow.
that's how we learned that the bishop can only intervene in the directly into the matters, the financial matters of a parish in cases of grave negligence, which
Excellent.
that's certainly so more subsidiarity. Yeah,
Erie
yeah.
would
So
be the
anyway,
land of the weird. I mean, given its history
That
as a trading port,
mhm.
there's
because that's
certain
the end of
bishops
the canal.
that are more administrative than they are shepherds, and I'm not a big fan of that. The one where I'm from initially, like he blesses himself, he does this, and, like when he's on camera, no less, and it's just like lukewarm, but he's. Like I went to a mass here on Sunday, and I'm hearing stuff in Latin I've never heard in masses I've heard in Scranton before.
Mm-hmm.
That's quite a few of them. There's a lot of good priests there, make no mistake, but there's a lot of lukewarmity as well. Here, it was
Yeah.
like, wow, I was impressed. I was very, very appreciative and grateful for it.
Yeah, yeah, it's a big church and there's all sorts of people running it. So, you're
Yeah,
gonna get a lot kind of in the middle of the curve where they're doing all right, and then you're gonna get some really outstanding extra holy men, and then you're gonna get the other side of the bell curve.
it's kind of representative too of like the ebb and flow to and away from God and the Jewish people. The same thing can be said about the Catholic Church over time as this continuation of Israel.
Right,
And
right.
you can see that the thing of one of the problems I notice with a lot of Protestants is they judge it based upon the sinners rather than the office of authority. And that's like judging a good song by a badly behaved musician. It just doesn't work that way.
Mm-hmm. I actually think that's the appropriate way to evaluate a religion is on its exemplars, right?
That definitely helps.
And like you could look at let's say some of the Eastern Orthodox saints, right? And a great many of them we would look at, we'd say, if we ever got an institutional reunification, we're not going to have any trouble with venerating these guys because they're they're
Yep.
uh, they're very holy,
That's
and
a
I
lot more
could even look at certain righteous Protestants and a good holiness of life and character, and appreciate the fact that God's elements of truth and sanctification are present in their ecclesial bodies, and that God can work for that. And then you could look at some other religions and think, "Oh, hey, that what your founder did, huh? All right."
Oh, I was going to know about the Aztecs. How about those guys?
Yeah, if that's what all of your priests are like, are ripping out people's hearts while they're still beating,
Right?
you know,
This,
um,
how about the followers of Baal and Moloch? Like we have version 2.0 with the abortion clinics today. It's the same thing, but
yep.
it's just in a subliminal manner.
No, it started to become pretty obvious. Somebody posted a
Yeah.
video of BOM about of some of this witch who was just saying that out loud. It's like this is actually like a magical way to, Lord have mercy on us, regain your autonomy and exercise control over your own life and your own destiny. And it's like, all right, you're the one who's saying it, not me. Like conservatives have been screaming about this for decades now, but now you're finally understanding your own doctrine. Uh, Never mind that. There's nothing left to conserve. Got to
Well,
go down to the root and build something
that's
new.
more the problem. Like,
Yeah.
you can't take an action in the world that doesn't conserve something, right? And so conservative needs, like liberalism, needs to be placed in a frame. And that's actually the observation everyone's made. Conserve what? Oh, well, that just means you're using the word incorrectly, you idiot. Just like liberalism, using the term liberalism, quote, incorrectly because it's not bounded by anything. And you can't be liberal in relation to nothing. That doesn't
I
make
do
any
think,
sense.
I think if somebody's just like conserve what, ha ha ha, I win, then that's probably like, but like it is, useful to like, okay, what is it that you think is good about the current order of things that you would like to see continued into the future? Like, I think that's unless
Yeah,
unless we're using different.
but that's not a designation of
Both
a
sides of the
political or social position, right? That doesn't designate anything. What
Right,
that does is it says what your preference is, which is useful. But
Think
right.
you're
of
only
this.
talking
Okay.
about preference at that point.
Think about this. There's your liberal side. There's your conservative side. They're both flat and wide. And if you get too wide on one side, the balance goes out. But if you look at the center, there's the third side, narrow, like the narrow gate. That's where everything's found. So, you got to have a little bit of both, but you can't go too far on one side or it becomes radicalized. And then the coin falls, to one side or the other.
I'm not a dualist. I don't buy it. I just think it's a bad way to think about the world, because the world is bigger than that. It's 3-dimensional, and so there's way more to it than that.
Oh, I know. The amount of variables and layers to it, even in higher dimensional physics.
Right. There's no reason to reduce it to 2 or 3. Like
Jesus did.
No, he increased the worldview by showing vertical causality in the extreme.
But he also took very complicated matters and whatnot that have a lot of variables involved and distilled into a simple message that even a kindergartner can understand, because I'm living with one. My brother only went to Catholic school.
I think I don't think there's anything complicated. I think complication comes from our rebellion against the created order.
I would say to our human minds, systems around us are extremely complicated just because we don't have the capacity to.
I've never seen one, G. I've never seen anything complicated around me, to be honest. Not once. It's all
National Airport.
I've been to airports. They're not very complicated at all. No, there's a lot going on, but none of it's complicated. And I know that because I've met the people that work there, and they're way simpletons. So they couldn't implement a complicated thing if their lives depended upon it.
Information that you're literally looking at all these people, and they each have individual lives, and you don't know the critical information of those lives.
If you're right, two things. If you're looking at things you cannot know, it's going to look complicated, right? If you're looking at too many things, it's going to look complicated. That doesn't mean it's complicated. That's something you imposed on the world.
I would say if you talk to each one of those individual people, and you find it probably get quite complicated.
Mark, you've got a funny definition of the word complicated. Would you go over that right now?
Yeah, that'd be probably better.
Sure. So you could say that flight is complicated, but it's not. You just have to know what's flying. And then it's like the theory of wing lift is really easy. And the difference between how a dragonfly flies and how a fly flies is really easy. These are simple things. Now, but if you put them in a bucket of flight, right, you've got 3 different mechanisms, many more than that, but you've got 3 different mechanisms there. So that to you can be seen as complicated, or at any time you can explain it simply. It's up to you. So you can make it complicated, but you don't have to. You don't have. There's no reason to make it complicated.
It really comes down to how well you can communicate.
No, that's different. That's totally different. My communication of a thing does not change its level of complexity or complication at all.
Well, that could also be seen as a very subjective thing to many people, because many, as you said, it can seem complex, but to others it may not.
Philosophers think everything's subjective, but they're all idiots. So, whatever. It's not subjective. Like, you're stuck in your body as a person. Everybody else is too. Who cares? That's like saying you're stuck to the ground by gravity. So is everybody else. Who cares? This is simple, right? You can say gravity's complicated. Gravity's not complicated. It sticks things to the earth. It's very simple. See? You can make it complicated. You can make anything complicated. But that's something you do.
Complexity would be entropy. Because when things get too complex and they fall apart and they fall into chaos before they be...
Complexity and complicatedness are 2 different things, I think.
Those are 2 different things. Complexity is more like the
definition of entropy
pattern of order within a set of things, right? Whereas complicated is something that can be broken down into steps, so procedures and propositions. Complexity is closer to being, and complicated is closer to materiality. But you can take any material thing and complicate it, no matter how simple it is, right? Because you can always go to a different layer of analysis. You can say, well, it's really your body's made up of cells, and each of those cells has all the features of a body within it, which is false, by the way. But they say things like that, right? And you can
About
just
Abraham.
add complicated, you can add more things. But that's you complicating something. It's not complicated.
Well, technically, yes and no, because if you look at Abraham with him with the binding of Isaac, he was given a ram within the thistles, which also signified and foreshadowed Christ to come. There's two different layers to that, but it shows that it repeats.
Ixnat has it right. If I make things complicated, I can sound clever. Yeah, complication is for people
That's
who want to sound clever.
So Gio, I've known Mark longer than you have.
Yes.
He's got this very clear picture of how things work, and he's got words that work really well for him to explain these things. And so this is just kind of what arguing with him is like, because he just like doubles down, and because he sees that what you're saying doesn't, I don't know, whatever. Point is that I don't think something like typology and foreshadowing and the different senses of scripture would necessarily be a more complicated reading of scripture, because we should think of it as all being, oh, for Pete's sake, great time to start coughing.
Four layers.
It's all representative, and it's all perspectival.
Pointing to the same thing, right? So it's all let's be very simple. It's the telling of the Christian story over and over again, and we don't need to make it more complicated. So anyway, I find a number of Mark's tools to be helpful to think about things and understand things. They all seem to line up with good Christian faith and morals, although usually in a more practical sphere. So that's just observations of somebody who's known Mark for a while. And he shows up on all of my live streams, and sometimes it's just been the two of us. And how am I to reward that sort of loyalty? Am I to stab him in the back? No, that's not right.
Appreciate that and respect that.
Jim, what are the lottery numbers for tomorrow?
Oh, shucks. Just hold on. I think I've got one here. Just a minute. Yeah, what are the lottery?
This is why we like Jim, because he's living in tomorrow.
Tomorrowland, eh?
There's the other side of the international date line.
There's Ozlotta.
There we go.
Oh man, I was just joking about that. I bet you can't buy those in the United States, though. You probably have to be an Australian.
That's right.
Australian citizen. That's how they get around that.
I'm going to run out now, but it's been a pleasure, and glad to finally see you face to face for once, guys. Mark, Brother Eric, Jim, God bless. May the Lord bless you with abundant graces to do whatever it is that needs to be done to glorify Him every day.
Amen.
Take care, guys.
What's the theme? I missed most of the stream.
I had some wild ramblings. Which is this is the place for my wild ramblings.
Right.
And this is my YouTube channel. I usually save the pulpit for things I'm much more certain about. So just because I've got the collar on doesn't mean that everything on this channel is going to be pure Christian doctrine. Sometimes it's going to be a little more experimental, and YouTube seems to be more experimental than the pulpit.
Bit schismatic.
No. Look, you shouldn't ever do schism on accident, right? Like that.
That's right.
That's not really possible. Like,
but inadvertently. You know what I'm saying?
No.
Yeah.
Not knowing the doctrine, or you say something out of line.
There was nothing out of good Christian doctrine. I know that well enough not to go on the other side, but sometimes I try and understand the world, and who knows, right? Who knows?
He was abusing the idea of conservatism, Jim. So I had to come in here and smack him around. No, he actually made a good point. I have to think about it more. I think that if you add proper hierarchy to your thinking on the world, which I don't have a video for yet, but I was hoping to record one tonight. I don't know if I'll have the energy to do it, but if you add proper hierarchy and momentum, which I do have a video on, then I think these things become a bit more clear. That
Right. So
would be
you would want, especially the higher up you go in the hierarchy, you would want people to be more conservative, right?
Well, I don't,
yes, and
Yeah,
they
right.
are in general. The
Usually they
problem
are.
is our hierarchies become corrupt by people who got wealthy yesterday, and wealth is a really bad measure for goodness. So
Oh, yeah. Oh boy, where did you learn that one, Mark? Because there's this book that me and Jim, will reverence, and it says those sorts of things all the
I
time, right?
don't
Like
I
it's
don't read.
easier for a camel to pass through an eye of a needle than it is for a rich man to get to heaven.
I if you say so. Much misunderstood passage, by the way. Yeah, it's remarkable to me that people are making that mistake and they don't realize it. But uh,
Especially like,
much of what we see is really just the incompetence sneaking up the hierarchy, and now we have incompetent leaders. Like all of Hollywood is incompetence because they've made this point. By the way, you should watch Critical Drinker's review of Superman. I think you'd really like it.
I did, yeah.
Oh, you did? Yeah.
I was proud of. So listen, I until very recently was completely stupid about movies. Like you could put me
Yeah.
in front of almost anything and I would just sit there and enjoy it and consume it and be a good little consumer. And watching his reviews has helped me start to notice things and start to
Right.
pay attention to things.
Right.
And so I
Yeah.
walked out of the movie like, man, like he can't end a dramatic scene without a joke of some kind. And like I
Right.
understand that is actually, a tool that you can use in dramatic scenes to like release the tension that you've built up. And
Right.
sometimes that happens in real life, right? Like you'll have a real dramatic moment and then something funny will happen, everybody will laugh. So it's not like it's bad, but like
Right.
if that's your only tool for ending a dramatic scene, then like the fundamental impression you're going to give is that everything's actually just kind of a joke. Um,
Right. Well, if you overuse it, right. Most of these things can be used sparingly. It's just that the
right,
word
right.
sparingly is not in their vocabulary or
Yeah, and,
conception.
and you got to use it wisely. So like there,
Well, but
if it had been like half of the scenes ended funny, it's
But
like, oh,
that's
it's Superman.
incompetence. But
Yeah,
that's
yeah,
actually incompetence. But it's one of the they've said it a few times on the open bar clips. I don't watch the open bar. That's a waste of my time. But I watch a lot of the open bar clips, and they've said it a few times. So there's a couple guys that roll with Critical Drinker who are in Hollywood. Like they work in Hollywood. They know some of these people. Some of them actually have special access and have seen the movies before they're finally cut and stuff like that. They've said the weird thing is not that the movie got made. It's that somebody wrote the script, somebody read the script, somebody greenlit the movie, and somebody put up cash. That's a lot of people to make a mistake, the same mistake, right? And that mistake has persisted for 15 years, maybe, or 10 years at least, just for the
hmm
superhero genre.
hmm
So they're just trapped in this comedy of errors where like nobody understands
And the
what
only
they're
thing that's
doing.
going to put an end to it is when the money runs out.
But
It will. The I think the problem is like people don't understand scale. So for example, Las Vegas was great when the mafia ran it. Why? Because it wasn't that profitable. It was profitable for 5 families. It wasn't profitable enough for MGM's investors. And people don't understand. Those are scale points, like big ones, actually. If you've been to New Vegas, you'll know this scale of money MGM spends on these properties is it's mind-boggling. Absolutely mind-boggling. So things that are at a happy scale, and you got to understand too, old Hollywood, the way you got into old Hollywood was you had money and you bought your way in, right? Because old Hollywood was a money sink. Almost every Hollywood project fails, right? If you've ever seen the movie The Producers, that's what it's about, right? What's the right? Well, we don't make money if the play's good and people attend the play. We only make money if the play fails. for real. Like that. I mean, it's a comedy, but actually, that happened in plays. Like that's a
Fiction
real thing.
cannot be stranger than real life.
Art is supposed to be a money sink. It's not supposed to make money. I would argue if it makes money, it's not art anymore. That would be a short form heuristic. If you make money
Oh,
on it,
is
it's
that
not
why
art.
sometimes the only beautiful thing in a town is the church?
Oh,
Right.
I don't know if I agree with that. I think that, like Jordan Peterson pointing out the uh, the 80-20 rule, right? The what do we call? Why am
Pareto
I blanking on this? The Pareto principle, right? Is very true in art, that it's that you're vying for eyes, and the reward distribution is such that um, it's not zero sum,
They're not
but the
vying
winners
for
take the
eyes.
most. Like the Mona Lisa is order of magnitudes
He
more.
wasn't vying for eyes, and he didn't make any money on it.
Yeah, that's the interesting thing is like the rich rock star is a very recent trope, right?
Right.
Well,
Like Bach had it made as like he had a stable patron with which he could raise his like 15 or 20 children, however it was. And he was just writing music constantly, and that's all anybody expected him to do was to write. But he didn't like to make the mega big bucks
Yeah, he didn't make
from
any
his
money.
music. He had a comfortable living, because he had that church post or whatever, and
Other
it
people
was
made money
well,
off his
what
art.
about and
yeah.
that's generally the way, and like it's in the Hollywood too.
Well,
It's
that's fine. Other people who know how to make money will make money. It could be off of
yeah.
art, it could be off of work, it could be off of anything, right? But the artist isn't making any money. And so if they're not making any money and they made that, then it could be art. It might also not be art because the Pareto principle still applies. And so
Well, what about
80% of your artists are
Michelangelo?
going to suck.
And I mean,
I mean, how many villas did he have in Italy, and how much land did he own in Italy? He got paid, right?
yeah,
Because like at
yeah,
a certain point,
substantial, yeah.
even your most airheaded artist realizes that he needs to eat. So
Mhm.
they'll sometimes they'll figure out how to get paid, but like art as a way to wealth is just the stupidest investment that you could make. Um, Now, art, because like I have to create things, otherwise I'm going to die. Like that's if you actually talk to artists, like that's kind of how they roll. Is they feel like this compulsion to make things, and it's going to hurt them if they try and keep that inside of them. And every once in a
Right.
while, somebody with money recognizes that and says, "Hey, why don't I just give you like some money and a place to live, and then you let me sell your things." And
Right.
like that's what a record company is. It's like, hey,
Right.
we'll go through all the trouble of printing the vinyls, advertising this, set up the shows, get it out into people, and then you just do the writing and we'll take it. And so that's
Yeah.
and it's just weird that the rock stars also became rich.
Well, but most of them were rich already. Like I was reading an article not too long ago about Semisonic. And Semisonic, back in the 90s, I think it's mid 90s, had this one big hit song. And it was the number one, Billboard top pop song or something. And I happened to see them in concert, which is the only reason I remember all this. And I read this article, and the guy said, we spent upwards of $750,000 in payola to get that song on the radio to make it the number one hit song. And I thought, starving artist, my ass. They had $750,000 to
I mean, like
blow on buying radio play. They weren't
like
poor.
Boston, right? Boston has that song Rock and Roll Band.
All
It's
lies.
completely made up. It's
Yeah.
just completely made up. Like Tom Schultz was a engineer working for Polaroid, very well compensated for his work, stole equipment from Polaroid, I think, and recorded
Yep.
all those songs in his basement. And then when he needed a tour, he hired musicians. Besides Brad Delp, he had known Brad Delp ahead of time. They were buddies in school, I guess. And when you
Right.
got a tenor voice like that, like,
Was
dude, you can
yeah.
sing wherever you want.
He's famous for doing something no other singer's been able to do. Yeah, that's complete fabrication. And yeah, he did steal the equipment out of Polaroid. My buddy's father was the one he was working under in some capacity. My buddy was always pissed off too. He's like, they never even offered us concert tickets. But yeah, that whole story on the first album about, living
Rock
in
and roll
cars and all that.
band, everybody is waiting.
Yeah,
You practiced right out onto the street.
nonsense.
No, you didn't. It's a fun
Right.
song though.
But people don't realize he pioneered that. He because he's a fantastic megaton. He's a top 1%, right? So he recorded almost all the instruments himself, which meant he had all those instruments, by the way, right? And he did it on this multi-track cassette thing that was brand new technology, right? That again he didn't pay for because he's still out of work. And then he sent that demo, just he didn't follow any of the normal channels that everybody else followed to become a famous artist.
He just sent demos out.
Right. And then because he was able to do that, but then he had to get a band together eventually because you can't play that live. You recorded it all yourself in your basement.
Yeah.
Yeah. So if you don't know that, you go, oh yeah, they came up through the ranks the way everybody else does. And all the song that he wrote about that were fairy tales. They were actual fairy tales.
Anyway, Mark and I are both big Boston fans, so
Best band ever. That was the number one debut album until the late 90s was Boston. Yeah, it was a huge album. Absolutely huge. And of course, you couldn't really go anywhere in Boston without hearing some Boston, which was great. That's how you knew the world was properly ordered. And now that's no longer true, which is how you know the world is not properly ordered. Easy. See, it's not complicated. Prove me wrong. Go ahead.
I guess I have to start a band called Fargo, and pretend that there's a dramatic story behind it.
Do it.
No, that's the thing I've been thinking about, right? It's like, if I were in the music making business, right, I don't think I'd want to do the big rock star nonsense. I'd rather be, as Mark says, rich already, so I don't have to, do this while starving. And then I'll just play local shows only. And if I somehow get famous, I'll just refuse to tour. And if you want to see me, I'll be at the Blue Stem Theater in Fargo, and that's only open during the summer because it's an outdoor theater.
Yeah, but that's what we've lost. We've lost that local identity stuff where, in fact, if you had a local musician who sang about your town, and famously in Wheel of Time, they have that, a horrible song, but whatever, you would have a level of cohesion that, and a level of attention focus. You wouldn't be focused on international artists or national artists or any of that. You'd be focused on the best singer in your town who sings a song about your town, right? Or about the history, right? I like this. Ixon, I'm the ELO guy. Do you mean Jeff Lynne? Now you and I got a problem, Ixon. I'm just saying. I tried to play multiple instruments on stage at first, or so I've heard. Jeff Lynne is, by his own admission, a complete nutbag. A genius. I've seen ELO twice, by the way. Fantastic. Just fantastic. But he was such a perfectionist that no one could work with him because he was always trying to make the on-stage live sound like the album, which for humans is impossible, which is proof that he's not human because he can do it. I'm just saying. It's 100% proof right there.
I mean, the way that The Who recorded Tommy would be very easy to reproduce. I don't know if you've ever listened to the album, but it's got kind of a live sound to it. So that would be a little more doable.
But but they were you have to kind of understand the time frame of music and how fast things move at that layer. So these are all wealthy people. They all have money, or they're poor people that find a way, right? They're so passionate. I don't think Jeff Lynne had any money, but he wasn't poor either. But so there are people that rise up. It's just extraordinarily rare, and it ain't you. It's never going to be you, right? That's never going to happen. So they were already talking about this problem of the recorded music and recorded versus live. And so they were always trying to fix that. So like even Led Zeppelin was trying to fix that gap, right? Because initially they thought like, oh, people want the album experience because that's what they're familiar with. But then what they learned later, and different people learned it at different times, and so there's still some momentum from people trying to make an album. So what they eventually did was they basically took the studios and like expanded them and started playing all the instruments as they would at a concert. And that's right. So they'd all be playing at the same time so they could listen to each other. They do wacky things, like they experimented with all that because they wanted to get the same sound. But it turns out that actually no, when people are in person, they just want the synchronicity of being around other people listening to the same thing. And it turns out the music quality just actually doesn't matter that much to those people.
To a
And
certain
this is
point.
why I don't like
To a
live music.
certain point. Studio Force, Dragon Force, they got raked by their fans for not being able to play the songs they wrote live, and so they had to hit the rehearsals a little bit and get themselves up to speed before they would went on tour again.
There's two issues. So like Jimmy Page got famous because he was a studio guitarist. So what do you mean a studio guitarist? Oh, when the band came in for their $400 an hour back in the 60s, sometimes studio time, and they only had a slot booked so long, and the guitarist was drunk or off his game or snorted too much coke or whatever the hell it was, the studio guitarist would come in and play his parts for him. And so because he was he did these, actually I think it's called session guitars, but whatever. Like that's how Jimmy Page got known, because he was just really good, fantastically consistent, even apparently on heroin, different problem. And so he could pull it off. So he got a steady paycheck from that until he started his bands. And first it was Yardbirds, and actually there might have been something before that, but then that
Blues
sort of
Breakers.
morphed into Zeppelin. Yeah, I think so. Yeah, he did it. He did a couple. They all experiment with bands, and they're in and out. And that whole thing, now that I'm learning more about it, I'm just like, yeah, this just follows the pattern of everything. It's a lot messier than people think. It's not as cut and dry. And a lot of these guys are in 4 bands at once, and that's not unusual, right?
Father Eric, have you talked about Nostra? Is it Aite?
Aitate.
Aitate.
Yeah, that's a good that's a good ecclesial pronunciation right there.
What you said? Aitate?
Yeah, aitate would be the wicked and cursed classical pronunciation, which is not tolerated on this channel. Now, I understand that you didn't know that, so I'm not going to penalize you in any way. But
Okay.
I just want to make that clear for anybody who's familiar with the different pronunciation forms in Latin, that we use ecclesial pronunciation on this YouTube channel.
Okay. Yeah, I was wondering if I could ask you some questions about it, or your thoughts.
Oh, yeah, boy, it's been a while since I've studied that one. That was back in
Going to
seminary, the last time I really looked at it. I don't remember it being particularly long, though.
It's short.
Yeah,
wanna
and
put it in
that
the chat?
was kind of the declaration on interreligious dialogue and interreligious relations there. And it's one of those things where people can very easily, read into things that weren't actually there, and like imagine that all of a sudden, not everybody has to believe in Christ anymore because Karl Rahner said that there's invisible Christians everywhere, and obviously the Second Vatican Council is proclaiming that doctrine, even though it's nowhere in the text. So anyway, that was the '60s for you. But what's on your mind? Because
Well, I think it's like the paragraph on I think it's paragraph 3. They talk about Muslims, and I don't know if I believe it may be a second paragraph where it's not. There's not that many. Is it actually going to paragraph 4 where they talk about the Jews?
No,
Oh,
it's
no,
paragraph 3 is
5.
is about yeah. It's awfully optimistic. And that's what you can say about a lot of these Vatican II documents.
Well,
Without being a bad Catholic, is like this was really optimistic. They thought that we could, come into and some good things happened, and I hold to that. But yeah,
I think my concern with hindsight too is that it only gave sort of like half the message in the sense
is
of
this tying into the debate that's on YouTube right now? Is whether we all worship the same God?
yeah, we're going there.
Yeah, okay. I was worried we were going there. So let's just go there, right? Let's just go there. I
Uh,
don't know.
but before I just in this doc, I want to talk about it because I think that it didn't put the boundaries on the other side of it, right? Like it just sort of said it was we're trying to be positive and open, but we're describing that yes, they worship the same God because they worship God the Father, at least as far as the Jews go. But are we? But it's not it's not the triune God. It's not the Trinity that they're worshiping. So
Right.
like they could have so they're trying to be as open as possible and give the positive side, but they don't give the boundaries to that. And I think it
Yeah,
would
and
be
it's
a much
useful.
fuller document if they had, given the buts or the limits.
Yeah, what year did this one come out? 1965, right? So this is one of the
Yeah.
last documents, right? People are getting a little tired of these 2-month long ecumenical council sessions, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
it's kind of an excruciating process to go to one of these councils, both nowadays with all of the modern amenities available in Paul VI auditorium, and even more so when they were in the St. Peter's Basilica, uh, which wasn't really built for that sort of meeting, right? It's built for mass that might take 3 hours, maybe four. So I think a piece of context that can help you understand this one would also be reading it in conjunction with Dignitatis Humanae, the Declaration on Religious Freedom, and from about and you can see this all goes back to France, right? Um, and especially the uh, Edict of Fontainebleau, where it was like the late 17th, early 18th century. There was a push by the church, or we'll say many bishops and priests, and by the king to have one religion, one king, one church, right? And this wasn't the ordinary like, oh, we can tolerate a little bit of dissension, and like as long as you stay within these certain boundaries. This was like a and so
And this
that
is a document called Dignitatis Humanae.
this is 300 years leading up to Vatican II, which is the
Okay, yeah,
time scale you have to evaluate these things on.
I understand. Yeah,
And this led to an awful lot of violence, discord, unhappiness, even amongst like otherwise faithful Catholics who are like, man, like I know these Protestant heretics from Geneva are just the worst, but like, do we really have to deport all of them? Like, we're talking a million people here, something like that, on that kind of order of magnitude, right?
yeah.
So there's this conflict in France, not yeah, Voltaire comes in and says we should just practice toleration, where we're not, saying that they're right, but we can give them some rights. And that's actually a lot of the background of the French Revolution, which
Mhm.
went, horribly awry, but like this energy to do this didn't come from nowhere, right?
Yeah.
There was
It was a
this
reaction.
it was a reaction to the Sun King over centralizing things and not enough reforms being made. And
Well,
then the 19th century happens, right?
yeah.
So for a time, this is all just a French thing. The 19th century happens, the unification of Italy, Pope Pius IX being the prisoner of the Vatican and all of that. And there's a pretty harsh reaction against the modern things, the modern times, and rightly
Yeah.
so, because a lot of it was a disaster, and
He
they
put
could
out a
see
document about like the 80 errors or something, right?
the
That
syllabus of
was
errors. Yeah, it
syllabus
comes
of
in and all
errors.
of that.
That was Pius IX.
And so what the 19th century pontiffs really wanted to do was to go back to the way that things had been. That you would have the Catholic Church, that would be your state religion, and other religions to the extent that they could be uh, co-opted into the public order would be merely tolerated. Um, so that's going on all throughout the 19th and the early 20th centuries. It makes things uncomfortable for Catholics in the United States because they're continually accused by our Protestant neighbors that we're just trying to overturn our freedoms and our tradition of civic and civil rights, and that once we get into power, we're going to establish the Catholic Church as the state religion because that's what your popes say that you should be doing. And
Mm-hmm.
yeah, so there's a new way of thinking that was maybe not entirely new, maybe a recovery of certain patristic fathers. You know, you could look at
Yeah.
Tertullian in that of like, you know,
Which is
maybe we've got the emphasis wrong here, right? So if so there's in the Catholic mind there's always this conjunction between um duties and rights, right? So if I am being given the duties of a pastor of a parish, I need to be able to have the authority to carry out my duties. I need to have the authority to carry out what it is that is um, uh, my role here. So, if we're going to say, and I think we can say this, that all human beings have a duty to seek the truth, they need to have the authority and the right to seek it freely and without coercion, which wasn't really the way Christendom had operated. Christendom would use government coercion on minority religions, sometimes to a rather harsh degree, other times to just a minorly debilitating degree. The American contribution to the Second Vatican Council is mostly Dignitatis Humanae. I think John Courtney Murray, he might have been a Peritus at the council. If not, people were reading his essays and his articles and his books, right? And that was when the church said, you know, the government shouldn't be coercing people in matters of religion. People should have the right to be free of that so that they can fulfill this solemn duty they have from God to seek Him and to seek the truth. So I think a lot of that history is behind the goals of Nostra Aetate, right? That were and when they were, you know, some people go overboard with the newness of Vatican II, and you know they have this strange sense that it's founded a new church somehow. Um, but there were points of discontinuity, and this is a point of discontinuity where
yeah.
we were, I think, recovering a very ancient Christian tradition of a certain just freedom of conscience. You can find it written down in Tertullian, in a letter that he wrote, which
Tertullian?
we have, yeah, which
Fifth
I know
century.
second century,
Century.
yeah,
African. Yeah.
North African writer, probably a lawyer by training, and you know he had actually he must have had a little bit of money because we
From a
have
leg-
because we have so many of his manuscripts, right? And you think
mm,
it's expensive to get studio time in the 1960s. How about a scribe to make
Mm-hmm.
30
Copies.
copies of your treatise on the Trinity, right? And so, because we have so much of his writings, he probably had a little bit of money. And I can't remember what the name of the letter is, but you could probably put it into a large language model of
Yeah.
what did Tertullian believe about religious liberty, and it'll find it for you. All of that to say that there was this idea that we were going to reset our relationship with a lot of different people and like try and turn over a new leaf, start things afresh. And that's a lot of the energy that goes behind Nostra Aetate.
I just want to come back on so Dignatus Humanae. That was
Dignitatis.
Dignitatis.
Yeah.
Dignity. Human dignity.
Dignitatis.
Of
Humanae.
human dignity. It's a genitive.
Okay. Of human dignity. That was when was that written?
1965.
Okay.
Both of these are very end of the council.
All right. So there was another. There's those 300 years before. There was that push that you talked about having the one church, one king,
which
one
was
God.
standard operating procedure just about everything in Europe from the time of Theodosius the Emperor on.
When was
so
that?
Like Theodosius, that was late 4th century. Right? He was the one who made Christianity the official religion of the Roman Empire.
Okay.
And this is the really complicated thing, right? Because Dignitatis Humanae doesn't say you can't have a state church, or the Catholic Church can't be the state church, or the Catholic Church can't have special support from the state on account of it being the true church. What it says is human beings have the right to be free from coercion in religious matters, because the assent of faith is supposed to be free, and Jesus himself does not coerce anybody to believe in him.
Okay. Yeah, I agree with what you're saying there. So, but I'm interested in this. So you're saying it's all goes back to the 4th century. This idea of like the one state, one God, one.
I mean, that goes
church.
back as far as human civilization goes,
Okay.
but it began to be practiced in the Catholic Church by Theodosius.
Okay. And would you say that integralism is a resurgence of that, or an attempt to?
Absolutely, that's
that?
exactly what they think they're doing. Is they're going back to the way that things are supposed to be, and like, golly, if I could live in a place where Catholicism was the state church, as long as there wasn't any coercion of the other churches, like, that's actually okay.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Now, you need to be a little bit suspicious of the state because, it belongs to the city of man and not to the city of God, and therefore has different aims and different ends. Be careful not to be co-opted by Caesar and you become just a chaplain to the czar. All of those disclaimers would still apply, but like, there's actually like having Catholicism recognized as the true church in a state has a certain integrity to it, right? Like, you've got our Lord, you've got the Roman Pontiff, you've got the major archbishop, you've got your sovereign or your prince, and you've got all the peoples all down the way, all worshiping the same God. Like, that's great. Why wouldn't you want to live in a coherent society like that? So.
Okay. Yeah, no, this is really interesting because this aligns a lot with. Like,
I took a 3-credit class on this last month.
Nice.
So, but on that, I think that this sort of struggle between state and church, like you even see it in the Old Testament, right? With I think Pharaoh being a figure of that of the man God, right? The God,
And then
God King.
Gradually in the nation of Israel, there being a separation between. Kirk, you've got some music coming through. Once you got that straightened out, I'll let you back on. Okay. A separation between the priest, the prophet, and the king in the Old Testament times being like kind of an innovation,
Yeah.
and them having a certain independence, even though they were interdependent, and intertwined. The
But I can,
distinction in those roles.
but I think you can even see that in the theme of Exodus, of Moses bringing God's command, "Let my people go so that they may worship me in the wilderness," and like that worship me in the wilderness part is often sort of left out. Um, and it I think if you frame it that way, you can see it like the 10 curses as sort of this negotiation where it's like, okay, well, where Pharaoh keeps on trying to assert his power and sort of come to a compromise, and the compromise is he reneges on his compromise, and it's rejected. And the compromises are like, okay, the men can go, but the women, children, and property have to stay. Okay, the people can go, but your property has to stay, or until it's no, everything has to be out of the control of the state. You have to let.
But Xander, that's anachronistic. They didn't have a state. These concepts you're talking about is not how they thought about the world.
I know that.
Pharaoh is not a king. That is actually not true. Pharaoh is a god king.
That's what I said. He is
a
a god
different thing, because the ancient world, no one had a state. That didn't happen. Like we put that on them. The birth of the city-state is ancient Greece.
Okay, but they're still dealing with these forces, I think.
No,
right?
but it's God versus God.
Forces.
No, it's God versus God. It's paganism versus monotheism.
God versus gods.
To do with government.
God versus gods. Yeah.
But the desire to go back to Pharaoh is about seeking safety and comfort, right? Like there's
right. Yeah. No. That's in the Bible, Mark. You haven't read it, but that's in the Bible. People grumble against Moses. They say, how we miss the leeks and the melons and the cucumbers, and the flesh pots of Egypt, and we should go back. So,
well, that's just materialism. But sure,
I don't think it's just materialism. I think it's also the promise of there's people want safety, they want the assurance, and they're willing to accept slavery for that, right?
They're always enslaved. That makes no sense. I mean, everybody's enslaved by so many things. It's a ridiculous way to think of the world.
Well, I mean, if you're
under a different name,
if you're worshiping something, if you're adoring something, you can be something's servant without being its slave. Right? It's not necessarily.
That's where the New American Bible is a little bit tricky to you, because the word doulos, which in the New American Bible is commonly translated servant, is
slave.
It's just slave. It's just slave, right? We've got this history with slavery that we're uncomfortable with, and so we often servant, right? He's a servant, it's often slave.
Well,
so we're going to be slaves to Christ the Lord. Everybody's happy with that. Like, we can be enslaved to him. Like, he's going to be a good master. He's going to take good care of us. But
because there's also the term of being enthralled. Is like a thrall is another term for being a servant or a slave, right? And so when you're enthralled to someone, enthralled.
That would be like probably from a Germanic root, wouldn't it?
Mm-hmm. That's enchantment in the material realm, is enthralled.
That's the way it's used. That's the way it's used in English now, but I think it has a deeper linguistic origin, which Mark only cares about how the language is being used now. And he's going to tell you he's a pragmatist.
No, I use etymology all the time. No, but like the way you're thinking of the Xander is very anachronistic. Like, they didn't think this way at all. Like, all these terms you're using, they didn't even have, and they didn't have equivalents of. We kind of forget most languages in the ancient world had far fewer words than we can appreciate. Like, far fewer. And we speak English.
I don't know.
More than twice as many words as any other language.
No, Xander, especially biblical Hebrew, and like RJ might be able to confirm this for us, but like every word has like 3 different English translations at the minimum,
Yeah.
right? So these ideas were all
Oh,
much
okay.
more.
Or
But
yeah, but I think that
Go
the
ahead.
complexity in language always appears in different places. Like I've noticed this by studying different languages. Like Japanese, that for example, has the complexity in its syllabary, so you don't see complexity in like the phonemes or in the verb structure, for example, where like they call them irregular verbs, but all the irregular verbs, the conjugation patterns are very rigorous and um, very discernible and easy to follow. And so I when you say that the ancients didn't have the like I maybe I'm misinterpreting what you're saying, but when you say that the ancients didn't have the same linguistic complexity we do, I think that may just be because of having to go through the lens of their writing, right, where they had
So
They just
listen,
no, they
we've got
they
articulate
three
didn't think
language.
different
of the
words.
world that way.
We've got 3 different words. We've got breath, we've got wind, and we've got spirit.
Hear it.
All of those are ruach in Hebrew.
Right,
Okay.
because it's the same concept, and the fact that they operate on different scales is irrelevant to simpler people who are thinking about the world in vertical causality terms rather than in retarded terms like we do now. And that's technically what's happened. We're thinking about the material thing, so the language has spread out and gone down. And
That's
now we have all these words for all these things, and some of them are higher and some of them are lower, but we argue about that constantly anyway. So who cares, right? The ancients would have just been looking at it like, we don't know what you're talking about. See, the conception of a state doesn't exist in Egypt at this time. It's not
just
there. There's no such thing as the conception that we have. Any definition, any possible set of definitions for state that you have is not nowhere in their thought at all. Doesn't
But
inconceivable.
well, even if the words aren't there, the forces what they're trying to describe is there. Like
No,
I
it's
mean,
not. No, it's
so
not.
no.
You're being anachronistic. You're casting a modern frame on the people who used to live before, who never thought about those things. But most people had no access to information. So let's suppose that people knew there were countries, which they didn't think about. Some people, almost no one, like almost none of the people, because it's only the people directly with the emperor, not the soldiers in the army either. They just know we're going out to fight this battle. They don't know about territory and boundaries. They don't understand any of that, and because they don't have to.
And they thought of it
Well,
in terms of nations, not in terms of states.
well, does
No, empires. It's empires.
does math exist if we don't have words for it? Like I think the patterns
Yes.
they're seeing, even if they
Yeah,
didn't have the
quantity.
linguistic
No,
complexity.
but they're not seeing it. They're not. They can't travel, and they don't travel.
think-
They never leave their
Okay,
village.
we're getting very far off the original track here because we were supposed to figure out whether or not Muslims worship God or not, right? Like,
Yeah, well, we can go back to that.
yeah,
Go to that. Get out of Egypt.
we all need to get out of
What I-
Egypt. We're
what I-
all
what I-
waiting from our deliverance from Egypt.
From Egypt.
Right.
So,
what I find amazing, or I don't know, interesting, I suppose I'll use that word, is especially American Catholics or Catholics all over the world and Christians, they conflate the Old Testament. There's about 72, 73 books, and the New Testament. Now, I, as a Catholic, I'm concerned with the New Covenant, with the 4 Gospels. All those Jewish fables, people were not educated. They wrote in Aramaic and Hebrew. And as you know, that was all translated into Greek, from Greek into Latin. And the biggest tragedy the Western world has received is the burning of the Alexandria Library, where all those manuscripts, handwritten scrolls, were destroyed in terms of literature, in terms of philosophy, in terms of theology of the ancient world and the early Christian world. So, getting back to the issue, to the point, which is Muslims, other denominations and religions, and talking about the church or the power, as I mentioned last week. You've got that Ted Cruz mentioning evangelical Christians as we speak. You're part of the executive government, which I just simply can't reconcile. Mind boggles. Nobody
I
mentions
could talk some things about the
You know,
Australian government, the
no,
COVID
no,
lockdown.
Yeah, they run the
it's not
state.
criticizing the government. What I'm saying
Yeah.
is he claims to be a Christian. Not a beep from the bishops. I'm not talking about other denominations. We have to support X. Hello, talking about
Protestants,
state. Yeah, but
Jim,
I'm not going to go there. We canvassed that last week.
that's the
Getting-
Protestants. Yeah,
but
they really want
mean,
clout, so they call them.
But getting back, correct me, Father. The beauty about Catholicism, it's the hierarchy, and when the Pope speaks on the doctrine in cathedra, for example,
Right, on
the
matters
last
of
thing,
faith and morals.
yes, exactly, and he interprets the various meanings, as I mentioned a few months back. Words have different meanings to different ages, different cultures, different people, different languages. You mentioned etymology, which is the root of a language or the word. So you got to put it in again, I'm not arguing theology, I'm arguing history. And the beauty about Catholicism, it's the ultimate arbitrator. The court is the Pope. That's why you got 36,000 Protestant denominations in America and exponentially expanding. Good luck. And everybody says, I am Veritas. I know how to read the bloody Bible, and I will tell you the truth.
Yeah.
And this is, look at Abraham, look at Moses. And they always conflate the Old Testament. Well, that's part of the Bible. But Bible is composed, written, different periods, and Old Bible is basically Torah, as I understand, which is a Jewish book. The New Testament is not a Jewish book. It is a Catholic or Christian book. And that's the delineation which I emphasize. But a lot of these, everybody, Abraham, what about the Egypt and apply to, Israel and all that? Yep, fine. And they,
This is really simple, Jim.
The Schofield Bible. There you are, written in America by a radical.
This is
whatever.
really simple,
Anyway.
Jim. This is really simple, Jim. Right? And I don't think RJ is gonna like this, right? And my religion isn't for him to be like this, but Catholic Church says quite clearly that the church is the new Israel, right? And Jacob doesn't like it, Joseph doesn't like it, RJ doesn't like it, and they in this country are free to continue going to their synagogues and not believing it. And I do not plan on putting any coercion on them.
Oh no, exactly. No, I'm not.
Right. But it's
anybody. It's free will. Yeah, exactly.
So when you have that understanding, right, and you have that understanding, even just kind of implicit in your Catholic imagination, you don't make those kinds of mistakes, right?
Right.
So it's very simple here.
Well, I was just going to ask you, Jim. The question I was going to have for Jim was basically, do you not believe that even though there's obviously a clear separation between the Old Testament and New Testament, that the religious culture which Jesus was raised and educated in was the same religious culture that the Old Testament was describing of Israel, that Jesus was a member of the nation of Israel?
Well, he was Jewish. He was born and bred in that culture. I'm talking in terms of a man. I'm not arguing spirituality or his deism. Yes, he was there. Well, what happened? The chosen people have rejected him. End of the story in Northern Territory.
Well,
that's when St. Paul comes and he says, I am the way. And please correct me. If you want to go to the Lord, I am the way. Getting back to the argument, whether you're Muslim, Buddhist, Kalathumpian, I don't care. We've got to be collegial, happy, and all that. What I'm objecting about Vatican II is this kumbaya crap, which is, ecumenicanism. And
I don't think it's actually in the document.
and various encyclical, which you mentioned, there's quite a few of them, since post 65. It's a disaster for the Catholic Church. Last 60, 65, 2025, as from my perspective, is a bloody disaster. I'll tell you why. Very simply, you have rejected the magisterium. 2,000 years, the church language being Latin. I could go to Africa, Asia, South America, Upper Mongolia, and I can hear the Mass in Latin. And the beauty about the thing is if I walk into your bloody house and I say you can't speak English, you got to speak Somali, how would you take that?
I guess
I mean, you know, you lose some heritage, you lose culture, you lose the foundation.
I've got a question for you, Jim. Have you ever read Unitatis Redintegratio?
No, I haven't.
Yeah,
I'm not a theologian. I'm a historian, rather.
Okay. Well, I'll just
modern history, not even
content.
not. Yeah, well, I've got various encyclicals.
The fathers of the Second Vatican Council were insistent when they were drafting Unitatis Redintegratio to point out that any ecumenical gathering was not a time to compromise on doctrine, and that those who are participating in ecumenical dialogues on any level should be presenting Catholic doctrine with profundity and clarity, right? So, like, this is what the Council Fathers told people to do, and then people did all sorts of nonsense in the 60s and the 70s and the 80s and the 90s into the early 2000s and into our present time. So, you could lay this at the feet of Vatican II if you want, but the only thing that I think that we can...
Father, how do you explain James Martin, please?
He's a Jesuit.
Out loud.
The Jesuit.
We can, a very powerful Jesuit.
How do you explain Martin?
And he's so close to the altar, not the ordinary altar. I'm talking about St. Peter's altar. Okay. What about Father Marco? What about Marco Rupnik? What about Marco Rupnik?
Right? Well, that's historian, right? You're a historian, right? Like, read church history. It's always been a mess. It has always been a mess. It has always been a mess.
And it's better now than it ever has.
Jesus himself promised that there would be weeds which resemble the wheat, but are actually toxic if you consume them. He promised us that this was going to happen. And so, like, you can be mad about it. And, like, yeah, that's a natural response to the observation of injustice is anger, right? We got to be, like, discerning about our anger. Is this the appropriate time and forum for being angry? Because if we're all just going to sit here and be angry together and pat each other on the backs and like talk about how good it is that we just agree with each other, that all the bad people are bad, I'm not sure what the extra passions are accomplishing here. And if you're actually going to use the passions to correct injustice, it usually has to be very, like, restrained and controlled, so your passions don't end up destroying innocent bystanders. Because, as St. James reminds us, a man who cannot control his tongue, it's bad, but I can't remember the exact quote.
St. James, a man who cannot control the tongue. Okay.
Yeah, I can't control it. This is what happens when a Catholic tries to quote scripture from memory. The tongue is a burning fire. He's deceived. His worship is pointless. Something like that. So anyway, so we're in agreement about, like, what people shouldn't be doing, but, like, what is the what are we doing here? And I'm trying to figure out. All right, Xander. Here's my question about the entire: do Muslims worship the same God? But I'm gonna create a parallel point and see if we can abstract from that, right?
Okay.
I want you to imagine northern Germany in the 17th century, a thoroughly Lutheran town, right?
Mhm.
There are no Catholics here. Catholicism is illegal there. We've got a young peasant girl. She goes to the Lutheran church. She hears the Bible being preached upon by this Lutheran pastor. Let's say he's an honest pastor. He really wants to do a good job. He's living an upright and holy life. And he's trying to model that for his parishioners. This young lady lives her whole life hearing Lutheran doctrine, basics. They're going to live a holy lifestyle. They're going to worship God through the Son and the Holy Spirit. What does she know about Catholicism? The only thing she knows about Catholicism is that they worship statues, and she never meets a Catholic her entire life.
Mhm.
Did she ever actually reject the Catholic Church? There was no contact with Catholicism, and we can have a decent hope that the elements of truth and sanctification that exist outside the Catholic Church, but were present in her Lutheran congregation, would be sufficient to sanctify her soul and bring her into the abode of God, because he's merciful. And this young lady was like grinding wheat and feeding chickens and raising children and went to church every Sunday and just tried to do the best with what she had, right?
I
Never
have
got to meet a Catholic.
I have no problem with what you just said, and wish I could articulate it as well as you just did.
Okay, all right. Now, the Lord can so give the gift of faith to anyone he wishes, right? It's a grace and it's a gift. He can put it wherever he wants. He
Yeah.
can inspire salvific faith, hope, and charity outside of the visible bonds of the church and outside of the sacraments. The main problem with that is that it is invisible. You can't see God do it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So we don't know if it happens at all.
Yeah.
It could happen a lot and we don't see it.
That's
It
why
could
we.
have never happened even once, right? And we don't see it, right?
That's why
So,
we're
and,
called the judge by the fruits, because only Christ knows our hearts, and we don't get to find
right.
that out till judgment.
So, like, we know that the Catholic Mass is good because it's a sacrament. It's a visible sign of the invisible grace that's going on there. And this is true worship, right? And that's a great gift that we've been given. And we could look at Orthodox, they've got a very high degree of conformity. They've got legitimate apostolic succession, the tradition of the apostles. And we could look at that and say, yeah, that's worship. The farther you get away from Catholicity, the more gray it gets, right? And we can see elements of truth and sanctification, which can persist in these communities. And then once you get beyond, let's say, we can draw a convenient line canonically of whether or not we would accept somebody's baptism, starts to get real murky.
Yeah.
You can only worship the Lord in spirit and truth. So anybody who's well outside of the boundaries of Christianity, Muslims, I think the Jews would be a little bit more of a tricky case because they do still have the Old Testament, which they read and revere.
I think
So
that
that gets a
actually
little
the
tricky.
Jews because of what Christ said, I haven't come to replace the law but to fulfill it. I think that the rabbinic Jews have used sort of like this. They have the what do they call it? It's the word's escaping me right now, but this
Oral
sort of
Torah?
not the Torah, but this
Talmud?
Talmudic, or this tradition of like of dialect, of like engagement, of sort
Okay,
of
but
like.
I'm just going to finish my point
Okay,
there.
sorry.
All right.
Yeah, go ahead.
Insofar as somebody's soul is being enlivened by the Holy Spirit, even invisibly, that person could be worshiping God. Right?
Yeah.
Even if it's completely invisible to the rest of the church, their incorporation to the rest of the church is invisible, that we can't see it happen, but God saves this person out of his gratuitous grace, right?
Yeah.
And so that's what makes this whole debate very confusing to me, because people are trying to argue about whether or not this thing we cannot possibly observe, because you would imagine the second anybody whose soul has been so graced by God, if they got to hear the gospel, they would accept it immediately, because it's like that's what they've already got inside of them, right? We can't actually, it's like we're debating whether or not something we can't possibly observe is happening, and that just seems silly to me.
Well, okay, so I have sort of two counterpoints. One, that it the debate, the nature of the debate changes from the individual, from when you go from the individual to the collective.
Sure, yeah, the
Right.
Friday worship, I don't think that counts.
Yeah, like, or
It's pretty great that they've got some law or some knowledge about God, which is discernible from the natural law and the order of the universe, that he is one, that he is a creator,
Mhm.
that he is a lawgiver and judge. Like, that's all cool.
And
Happy
there's
about that.
and they have their own civilizations which are bearing some fruit. So there's some sort of connection to the divine there, at some, like, not imperfect,
Depending
but it
on
may
the
be.
time and the
Yeah,
place. Yeah.
yeah,
And who
yeah,
was in charge. Yeah.
yeah.
Nothing would change.
But I mean, like, there's they have artists, they have their own music. There's something,
Yeah.
there's some there, like you're saying. But
All beauty belongs to God. That's what you're trying
yeah,
to say.
yes, and truth and goodness, right?
Is by right.
Yeah. So what, uh, I think that, I mean, I don't know why what you just said there is not so clearly, is not the said so clearly in Nostra Aetate.
Just
Because
not for
everybody
you.
was sick of being at the council. They just wanted to get this thing dashed off and done so that they could go back to their diocese and get back to their.
It's an it's an audience problem. You write for an audience. That audience is not you. It's that easy. That audience is people at a certain layer of the hierarchy that you're never going to be at. And so when you read their stuff, you ain't gonna understand it because you're not there, and you have the wrong context. And that's the danger in everybody reading every book. And this is the thing that Plato warned about in the Republic. Forbidden knowledge is important.
One question, which I'm really concerned, that's for Father, is the issue or the question of synodalities and its continuance or lack of.
We'll have to ask Pope Leo what he wants to do with that, because the Synod of Bishops is a merely consultative body which meets and concludes at the will and the desire, the pleasure of the bishop. That was the word I was looking for.
What's the aim of it? What's the aim of it? What's the purpose of it?
The Synod of Bishops?
No. Synod of synodalities.
Elaborate. Depends on who you ask, right? Because some people have, frankly, like, these synods aren't that exciting. They never are. You get some documents. Sometimes there's some good stuff in them. So yeah, I'm not worried about it, right? Because, like, let's say it's all just a giant waste of time and money, which, if for my money, is the most likely outcome. It's like, well, dang, that was another stupid waste. Bishop Barron could have spent his time much more fruitfully, but instead he was chained to a desk in the Paul VI audience hall, talking with people. Yeah, are there certain progressives who are trying to undermine the church? That's the case. Thus has it always been. I have great faith in the indefectibility of the church. It's maybe easier for me to say these things because I'm a priest and I've got a little more authority to do things about it, and my diocese is pretty well run. So I'm less worried about these things, and I hope that you're able to. This is it's a book recommendation to add to Unitatis Redintegratio, right? It's The Religion of the Day. It's published by University of Mary Press. And Monsignor Shea has a chapter in there. It's something like Catching All the Ills of the World. but in like a minute, the basic thesis is that the church has to catch all of the illnesses of the world so that we can develop the antibodies and offer them to the world, and that's his understanding of things.
Did you say the
Because we've got the
university
blood
of
of
the day,
Christ. Hmm?
or you said university of the day, or
The
universal
religion of the day.
religion of the day? Sorry.
Yeah,
Okay.
the religion of the day. So that I actually got to hear the pre-published lecture version of it with a gathering of priests. And if you knew more about Monsignor Shea, it's okay if his word about him hasn't. But even Mark liked him, right?
He's awesome.
And
He's the
yeah,
best.
he's the best.
There's hope for the Catholics right there. Forget about
There's the guy who should be the
Aaron.
next pope because his Italian is better than mine, and you should want him to be pope and not me because I barely speak Italian and I am barely awake because look outside, it's dark, and I'm supposed to be going to bed right now. So
Okay.
it was a little lively today. I thank everybody for their
Well,
contribution.
It
And
was very bombastic. I apologize for my what's the word?
Outburst?
Impatience, outbursts.
yeah, well,
A spurt, it came out. But no, I'm sort of being critical of my Holy Roman Church, and which I
Yes.
love, absolutely love.
we'll all hold each other up in prayer, huh?
Mm-hmm.
And so what I'll say is good night and God bless you all.
Good night.
Good
Thank
night.
you.